going to be talking about escrow. Now, the reason behind late all these live streams lately that I've been doing is because I've been interviewing people for the last 3 years, and I wish at some point someone just condense everything that people have shared with me in terms of the knowledge, the jargon that gets thrown around all the time in real estate. Because I'm a big believer in leaving knowledge and skills for my children. And the only way to do that is by one, becoming a better version of myself. And the only way for me to master something is if I'm able to teach to somebody. And over the course of time, people try to use very fancy words, all these complicated concepts, and try to make themselves sound smarter than they are. I'm trying to take the opposite approach because if my daughter, when she's 10 and she can't understand what I'm talking about, then that's not being successful. And I want to be able to pass down those skills. So after a couple of years of interviewing, I want to take all the concepts that I've learned, digest it, and share it with all of you. And I'm really looking for feedback here, right? If you've been following us, we've been underwriting deals every single day for the past 500 plus days. And we never really took the time to go through all the different terminology and jargon that we talked about. So today, we're going to continue that process. We covered contracts, we've covered disclosures. And again, I'm not an attorney. This is not investment advice. I'm not soliciting any investments on this call. I'm just simply showing you what I'm learning, and how I learn things is by learning how to teach it back. And that's my best way of learning. So today we're looking at escrows. And this is a very, very important middle step, is what I'll call it, where there's a neutral party and they hold the important items until all the conditions of a transaction are met. And then that ultimately leads to the closing day, right? Because that's the grand finale, especially in real estate where money exchanges hands and the ownership, the keys get handed over, the title gets recorded county. All these factors matter. Okay. Now, on top of escrow, we'll probably highlight a few disclosures that might have to come up. We want to talk about what's mandatory, what's optional, and also just why are these steps necessary? So, I'm going to come up with some random scenarios or analogies based on my notes here, and I want all of your feedback, honestly, because I'm looking for ways to explain something to my children. And if they don't understand it, then I didn't do a really good job, right? The point is to make this stuff simple. So, let's take an analogy, right? Let's say Pokemon cards. I don't know why they're making a resurgence, but it's crazy. But let's say you and a friend are swapping rare trading cards. They could be baseball cards, they could be Pokemon cards, doesn't matter. But when you're swapping, especially if you're not in person, you're a little nervous about mailing a card first because what if they don't send theirs back, right? Or what if you're selling a card? What if you send your card and they don't send you the money that they owe you? Right? So this is why you need a middleman, right? Someone that's trustworthy, a third party that's neutral, and they're going to hold both cards or one person's card and one person's money until each of them follow their promises. And that's the essence of escrow in real estate. Escrow is just a neutral middle person or company, right? Call them title company sometimes, that holds the money and the documents until everyone has done what they said they were going to do, as outlined in the purchase and sale agreement or in whatever instructions that they have agreed to for the title company or escrow officer to kind of manage the entire process, right? So there's an escrow process, and that's the neutral arrangement we talked about. And then there's an escrow officer, which is typically the person or a profession that kind of manages all the escrow process to make sure the conditions are met. So I looked up what one of the top questions about escrow is, why do we need escrow? And in this scenario, it's there to help keep everybody honest and safe, and makes the buyer feel that they are secure so that their money doesn't go to the seller until title is clear. This way, the seller can also relax knowing that, hey, the buyer has provided the funds before I transfer title over. And finally, especially if there's a lender involved, typically there is, right? Sometimes people put a down payment and they get the balance of the loan from another lender. They want to see that everything is being handled properly by a neutral third party. Okay. No one wants surprises, especially at the last minute. So escrow is there to keep track of all the steps. It's almost like if you were watching a basketball game or a football game, there's a referee and makes both sides follow the rules. Similar thing. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the escrow process. It's probably about 6 steps. Let's take it step by step. The first step is opening a file. Typically, in a real estate agent, after an offer gets accepted and the buyer submits an EMD or earnest money deposit, the realtor will tell the title company to open escrow, right? And this is when the deposit or the good faith check goes into the special account. And the escrow officer will collect instructions from both sides based on what they have agreed upon. Second step is, well, there's title work and inspections, right? The title company is going to do a title search, and that makes sure that the seller really owns the property, and they also identify any potential liens or claims on the property. Especially if someone says, "Hey, I'm going to sell you this property," but someone else has a right to that property because the seller might have used their home as collateral for something, right? You want to make sure all that stuff is paid off so that when the buyer buys that property, they will own it wholly without any other liens or claims that might affect their ownership of that property. And usually the homeowner at this point is going to arrange for some inspections, especially to check the home's condition. So this is typically called an inspection contingency, or even if they don't have an inspection contingency, they'll probably still inspect it regardless, right? Just to make sure that the home is in acceptable and good condition, or at least the condition that they expect it to be as a buyer. Third step, there is the required disclosures, right? There's laws, federal, state, etc., that says the seller must share any known problems or hazards. And we talked a lot about disclosures just yesterday, and you can definitely check the live stream that we did yesterday. But the whole guiding principle is that you should disclose, especially if there's a material fact, material meaning that it is important information that might affect someone's decision to buy or sell. And honestly, the guiding principle is disclose as much as possible, especially if you think it might even remotely have an impact on someone's decision to buy a property, especially if you're a seller. Okay. Then, fourth step, there is the loan approval, right? If the buyer is borrowing money and the lender reviews everything, they're going to issue the final approval. So you have to wait until you get the final approval or clear close from the lender. And usually the escrow holder, they're going to coordinate with the lender about the new mortgage documents, getting everything signed. The fifth step is the signing day, right? This is usually when the buyer or the seller, they sign all the final paperwork to transfer the ownership and finalize the loan. And the escrow holder is really there to double check all the details to make sure that the paperwork is in good order. And then finally, the sixth step is the recording and the final release. And this is when the deed is recorded at the local government office, whether that's the city or the county, to show that the buyer is the new owner of the property. And then that simultaneously will allow the funds to be released to the seller. And that's the end of the process, right? Everybody celebrates a successful deal in that scenario because everybody did what they said we're going to do. And there was a neutral third party that made sure everybody stayed true to what they said they were going to do. Okay. Now, when it comes to escrow, there's a little couple things that we talked a little bit about yesterday about mandatory versus option disclosures. And I want to make sure I cover that again today because it's so important, right? There are so many details that the seller must share, especially at the stage of the escrow process, right? There's property condition disclosures. And the law demand that you have to be honest about any material issues, right? If especially if there's a leaky basement, leaky roof, a broken heater, it, think of it as what's a good analogy? Like if you're selling a skateboard to somebody and you know that one of the wheels is wobbly, you should tell someone that the wheel is wobbly. It's just a good. It's just what you're supposed to do, right? Don't sell someone a broken phone without telling them it's broken because someone has an expectation that the phone is supposed to operate like a phone. Very, very duh if you think about it, but sometimes people forget it. Then there are natural hazard areas disclosures. And this is required, especially if your property is in a spot that's prone to fires, wildfires, especially in California. You're in fire zone, floods, earthquakes that might affect the buyer's ability to get insurance or any other safety plans, right? You have to understand what's going on. Like even if you're a kid and you're going to someone's treehouse and you know it can get really stormy all day and really windy, I mean, you might want to tell someone what they're getting themselves into, especially if you're aware of the conditions of your area, so that they know what they're getting themselves into. It's just the right thing to do. Okay. Then, most important one, lead based paint, right? Some residents, they have layers of old coatings of paint that could be risky. And I like to think of this as sometimes homes built before a certain year, they typically might have lead in the paint that was used to when they were building a home. So it's a very, very big item that you get to disclose. And finally, I mean, it's just like if you were buying a piece of food, right? They will always say, hey, allergies may contain peanuts, may contain eggs, dairy. And that's because some people might have a very, very severe allergy to that food. So especially if they're in a factory that's made in a factory with peanuts, I mean, those could be life threatening things. So you got to disclose that. Okay. Then there are environmental hazards, right? If there's mold, radon, or any of those other issues, you got to disclose that. Similar to if you even if you're giving away a fish tank and you know there's like algae or bacteria problems, like you should probably tell the new owner to clean it thoroughly because it might affect whether they want it even, and most importantly, might affect their health. All right. So sometimes there's optional disclosures. Some folks might include a pest inspection report in states where it's not mandated, but it's good practice, right? It's like, hey, I did a proactive home inspection. I did a proactive pest inspection. Here's what we found. That could help you boost trust and reduce negotiation data because if a buyer is buying a home knowing all the potential minor issues with the home, then they go in with the expectation like the price that they are offering includes these potential minor issues. Right. So those are all the things that you really need to understand because for this to be a material fact, right? It's just any important information that might affect a buyer's decision or how much they pay. All right. So another top question that I found to kind of tie into yesterday is just some people might ask, hey, what if I don't disclose something major? And there can definitely be legal action. If you concealed any sort of defect, that buyer can take you to court. Or if you're still in the deal, I mean, the buyer might walk away, especially if the issue surfaces before closing. Then there's financial penalties, right? You might be on a hook for any repairs and compensations related to it. So at the end of the day, the moral of the story is just honesty is the best policy. All right. So this is going to get to the closing day, right? So after our disclosures are out in the open, your inspections are done, the funds are ready, the closing or the settlement can happen. And think of that as the final day, the graduation day, right? The escrow holder ensures all the final documents, like the deed and a mortgage, are correct. Then they record the new ownership with the county. The seller gets paid, the buyer gets the keys, and everyone's happy. All right. So hopefully this was a pretty good summary about what escrow means. All right. If we just wrap it up really fast, escrow is just the middle ground, the middle party, right? They make sure everybody holds and keeps their promises, and they'll hold on to the money and documents until everything gets done. The disclosures, they keep the deals fair because they make sure everybody knows what they're getting yourself into. All right. So please be honest. And then finally, you get to the closing table, everything gets recorded, and then hopefully you don't run into any big issues. And if this has helped you just see the big picture of what escrow and closing means, like please subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/at Kent_HG. If you guys ever want to stay in touch with our email list, go to affordablehousing.io, not .com, affordablehousing.io, and that's the fastest way or easiest way to kind of keep in touch with all of our content updates. All right. If you have other analogies that you think would explain escrow, the title companies a lot better, I mean, leave a comment down below in the comments. I would appreciate it because I'm always looking for better ways to explain these concepts to my children. All right. Have an amazing day. I'll see you all tomorrow for day 521. All right. Let's keep going, everybody. Have a good one, everybody.